The dog and I are here in Battery Point. In Tasmania's capital city, there's a place called Battery Point. It's the island's oldest suburb with a population of about 2,000 people. Some seem strange now. Since the English landed in 1804 and began building Hobart, Battery Point has been the site of industry, military, farming, and a whole bunch of other stuff. The shoreline today has been revoked from its natural state, pushed out, squared off with land reclamation. But back in time, the place had sandy beaches, virgin bushland, and cliff faces. The dog and I here next to these bins. It's all makes for a pretty unedifying corner of Hobart, but this spot was once the best location for a home in Hobart, and there was a very important house that belonged to a very important person here. These buildings, they weren't there. That's the side of a cliff that we're standing up on. There's not really anything left though, just maps and pictures. Robert Knopwood was the colony's first chaplain. He was granted 30 acres of land on the far northern end of Battery Point. His property, called Cottage Green, sloped to the harbour. Facing the sun, it was protected from both the sea breezes and the cold west winds. He planted an orchard raised from fruit stones, shipped from his birth nation. He also kept chickens and sheep and cattle. The cliff face that Cottage Green stood on top of is now covered with sandstone warehouses that have been repurposed for more contemporary commerce. The dog and I are walking across Montpelier. Back in the day, when there was a house up there, there was also a small river running down that way towards the Derwent. In the early times, there was a stream that ran down where Montpelier Retreat now is, and a small wooden bridge was placed across it. The flow today blocked, diverted and covered. That same flow of water had been used by the first Tasmanians. The last person of any origin to see that water run freely down Montpelier has been gone from the Battery and this world for a long time. An 1838 map shows a reservoir in the middle of Hampton Road and Montpelier Retreat intersection. It was fed by overflow from the Anglesey Barracks. From there, water was piped down Montpelier to the wharf, allowing ships to resupply. The reservoir was removed in 1859. After it was taken away, a large turning circle existed empty for years. The Cottage Green home didn't actually last that long, and the area that the farm was on would be chopped up many times, subdivided and redivided. Lives and homes coming and going for a century and a half. In the 1960s, a low-class slum with two major sweeps was demolished into nothing more than a car park, allowing Montpelier to be widened on the western side. By the early 1990s, part of the area was occupied again, this time with a modern office building. In the last decade gone, there was actually a plan to completely redevelop the area. Those plans were never realised. But in the process, some of the early homes' foundations were rediscovered. It's all been covered over again. Yet there are some walls. To see through them is to look backwards. One of Hobart's original mansions, belonging to Alexander Orr, was demolished in this period. Destroyed for progress, today there is a cold concrete wall and a functional cyclone fence. The original narrow version of the road saw buildings erected on the eastern side. Despite superficial changes, some remain. Montpellier Retreat Inn was a house that was turned into a grog hole in 1853. In 1919 it lost its licence, reverting to a residence. In the 1960s it was demolished to build an office block. In the decades after World War II, people still moved about the town on horse. Not only do the buildings to their right no longer exist, but this intersectional address joining Montpellier with Harrington has also been deleted. Anybody that comes down towards Battery Point from the city, which is that way, the CBD, will come to where the road sort of curves off. That curve isn't original, it was built after everything, and that's why these houses are here and these houses look strange, because they're remnant from then. To get down to Sandy Bay, you used to have to go down here, the road was where this park is, and then you get to Montpellier and then you take a hard right. That's all been changed, and everything that was has been lost mentally. But that's how it was. In the late 1880s, the deviation was built, creating a gentle curve for traffic to move through Battery Point between downtown Hobart and Sandy Bay. It wasn't until 1954 that the old portion of Harrington Street was renamed Kirksway Place. A lot of people that come to Hobart wonder what that chimney up there is. Well, there is of course an answer. The long stone building was erected in 1847, a malt house for Edward Tooth's brewery. The smokestack was built in 1851 when it became a flour mill. It was all later to become a hat factory for Joseph Bidencope. So this building is a leftover from a more industrial period of Battery Point. But there are other remains in the suburb that aren't as substantial, but are, in maybe different ways, more interesting. Nearby heavily faded black and white zebra stripes painted onto the curb to denote no parking allowed. Near the turn of this century, that convention was replaced by the single yellow line. Security over time. Original sandstone wall, heightened later with brick, topped off with concrete and smashed up bottle. Now illegal to perform but allowed to stay thanks to heritage. An image from the early 20th century looks foreign. The smokestack is still there, but other things have been changed and erased. The Queen Alexandra Maternity Hospital opened in 1908 and served the whole of Hobart. Probably the most famous Tasmanian ever, Errol Flynn was born there. By the 1980s, the facility was no longer modern and its services were replaced at the Royal Hobart Hospital. Today the building has become residential apartments. On the corner, empty land, surrounded by hoardings, keeping people out. That place is now the well-known Bob and Tom service station. In the foreground is a yard with wooden poles and cable drums and a linesman's horse-drawn platform. Very likely the telephone line maintenance depot. Within the perimeter, there are cages. So up over this fence that is all camouflaged from the street with all this foliage, there's a house, and that house used to have a zoo. Back in time, people thought it was a good idea to keep exotic animals in Battery Point. Hobart socialite Mary Grant Roberts built a zoo in the backyard of her private residence, Beaumaris. It existed from 1895 until her death in 1921, when it was moved to the Domain. Animals were kept in small enclosures and often died of exposure. It was, for the most part, a rich person's cruel folly. Today that land has been subdivided for homes. On the corner was the Battery Point School. It opened in 1885. Its bell tower was a landmark that could confuse a person into thinking that it was a church. Right up until 1969, when it burnt down, it could not be replaced. Most of the remains were taken away, but some of the sandstone was refashioned into the retaining wall that runs along the footpath. The school is gone, and the tower's bell can no longer be heard ringing, but somehow Battery Point is filled with echoes.